What's up, everyone? It's Bones here. If you like stupid deck ideas like I do, then this might be a video for you. But first, if you're a fan of in-depth combo videos, new set coverage, and fun stuff that we occasionally like to do on the channel, then summon out your Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer and pop those thumbs up and subscribe buttons. Now, for this first combo, it is a pretty old combo, but I still want to go over it for newer players that may not know it. We're going to normal summon our Vion, sending the Shadow Mist, then use the Shadow Mist effect in the graveyard in order to get ourselves the copy of Malicious. So we are playing a pretty bad brick here, and we're going to use the effect of the Vion in order to banish the Shadow Mist to get ourselves the Poly, activate the Poly, and we're going to go into our Dangerous. Now, you can go into Garura, but because I am playing Super Poly, I'm just going to go into the Dangerous in case you happen to use the Super Poly earlier in the match, and we're then going to be able to use the effect of Mali in order to get the Beatrice access. And from here, what you send is going to be dictated by the rest of your hand and field and graveyard and stuff like that. But in this case, if you just need an interruption, you can send yourself a Keldo, which, as you see, we are on the Ishizu cards. Now, this second hand, or this second combo, reveals that we are on the Horus cards, and this is an integral part to the deck, in my opinion, just because it adds that extra consistency and power that the deck wouldn't have without it. So we're then going to be able to use the effect of Shadow Mist to get ourselves the Mali, use the effect of Vion in order to banish the Shadow Mist to get ourselves the Poly, activate the Imseti in order to pitch the Mali and itself to get the King Sarcophagus and draw one. So that's a really cool synergy that you have there, being able to add the Mali and then pitch it with Imseti, which is just a great send off the Imseti overall. But we're going to then be able to use the King Sarcophagus to pitch whatever card you drew in order to send the Happy, and then you're going to revive the Imseti and Happy as we control the King Sarcophagus, and then go into our Zombie Vampire. Now, I'm not going to mill anything of relevance here, as we don't even play the cards in the deck that we happen to mill here. The point of this one is to show the game plan that you're going for with this deck before I get into the later parts of the video that actually show how the deck functions with a full hand. Now, for this next combo, I want to show off what happens when you draw both of your normal summons. And there is a cool way that you can play this, which is normal summoning the Vion, sending the Shadow Mist, then use the Shadow Mist to add yourself the Mali. We'll be able to make our Beatrice play. The most important part that you're going to see here is that when you go into the Dangerous, you can end up pitching the Unizombie so that you can get it into the graveyard, and this gives your Beatrice a different send option for this turn. So we're going to special summon out the Mali so we can go into our Beatrice, use the effect of Beatrice so that we can send the Mizuki, activate Mizuki to revive the Unizombie. We'll then be able to use the effect of Unizombie, sending a zombie from the deck to the graveyard. In this case, we'll be sending another copy of Mizuki, and then we'll be able to use the Denier here to revive itself, as we'll use its effect in order to put back the Mali from deck. We'll then be able to use the Mali, as we're then going to get the extra body on board here, go into our Baron. I would like to keep in mind that you can do it in a different order if you have an extra card in hand, because you can make the Denier a level 4 or the Unizombie a level 5, go into Omega, alter your turn depending on that. But we're then going to be able to use the effect of the other copy of Mizuki in order to get back our Unizombie, and this gives us access into SP Little Knight, with the Beatrice still having a send on your opponent's turn. Now, for the first of two test hands, and we happen to draw pretty solid, but you'll see that we're going to run into a really weird thing here. So we're going to be able to use the effect of Imseti, getting ourselves another copy of King Sarcophagus, and we happen to get another copy of Malicious, which means we can't use the one in the graveyard. So we're just going to pitch it to send our Happy, and then we can use our Horus cards in the graveyard, or not use, but you'll be able to special summon them, and then go into your Zombie Vampire, use the effect of Zombie Vampire as we mill 5, and then we'll be able to bring back our Mizuki. So I would like to keep in mind that we actually mill 4, not 5, but we'll then be able to use the Shadow Mist here, as we'll be able to add ourselves the Denier. And this is another really cool thing that we get here, that because we have the Unizombie, we can normal summon it, pitch the Denier, and this will make our Malicious live again in the graveyard, so that we can then go into our Omega, use the effect of of Denier in order to put back a Mali in the deck once we use its on-field effect so that we can then use the 2 monsters on board to go into an SP Little Knight and then have 2 more bodies that we can get off the Mizuki, as well as the Malicious that we have access to now because we got the Denier off of the Shadow Mist. And we're going to send our Necroworld Banshee, as we'll then be able to use the effect of the Mizuki. And from here you can then go into your Baron, as then you can activate the Necroworld Banshee, get yourself the Zombie World, set the Imperm here, and then end your turn on this. So just a really cool way to play out this hand in my opinion. And in some formats this can also be really strong if Zombie World happens to be a big counter to certain decks, but this is all theory as well because the Ishizu cards might just not last that long, and we happen to play all 4 of them in this deck. For the final test hand, you'll see this is a much more mild test hand, as we just have the Keldo in hand and we're relying on the Horus cards and stuff like that, but we'll get ourselves the King Sarcophagus. We'll then be able to draw a card as we get into Denier. I'm just going to activate the Droll here for no reason, and then we're going to activate the Crossout to it, but we're then going to continue playing here as we'll activate the King Sarcophagus, use the effect of the King Sarcophagus in order to send the Happy. We'll then be able to revive our 2 Horus cards, go into our Zombie Vampire, use the effect of the Zombie Vampire in order to mill 4, and then we get to revive 1. We did mill the Zombie World, but we also have the Mudora, and this is where you're going to see another important part to this deck in my opinion, and that is what you do with your end board. As we add ourselves the Vion, we'll then be able to use the effect of Vion sending the Mali, and now we're going to go into Dweller. Tearlaments and stuff like Unchained are still popular this format and something that you have to be taken account for, so the rank 4 access that this deck gives you is something to not be slept on in my opinion, as you have the Ishizu cards like Agido that can get you into a rank 4. You also have your Vion and your Shadow Mist and everything else that's level 4 that you play, but we'll be able to special summon out the Mali here, as we'll then go into the SP Little Knight, use the effect of the Denier, as we'll then be able to use the Denier's effect, putting back the Mali, and then we'll be able to special summon the Mali. And now from here, what you do is dependent on the situation of the game. You can set Super Poly here and then go into Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. I'm just going to activate it here to show that you can do that. There may be better options to make under the circumstance that you're in. You may not have gone for the Dweller and stuff like that, so take that part with a grain of salt. It's just something that I wanted to show, that worst case scenario, if you do end up going with this approach, you can just set the Super Poly and then play your turn out depending on what your opponent does. You may not even use the Super Poly, you use the Droll, might end your opponent's turn, and then discard whatever you draw on your next turn in order to fuse into your Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer that way. But with that, I'll take you onto the deck profile. With all of the combos out of the way, we can finally get onto the deck profile. The Horus cards are probably really the most important part here, where being able to go into Zombie Vampire, making the Ishizu cards kind of worth it to play with such small zombie and hero engines is really what makes it work in my opinion. Then you also have the 3 King Sarcophagus, which is also really important because not only does it give you that Zombie Vampire access, but it can get things like Mizuki and your Malicious into the graveyard, giving you those extenders in order to make stuff like SP Little Knight or whatever rank 6 or 4 play you may want to go into, or even a synchro play if you happen to get the Unizombie into the graveyard with a Mizuki and stuff like that. That said, what I really liked most about this deck idea, even though it is kind of a dumb deck idea, is the fact that you can make pretty sizable boards, as you saw from the hands shown earlier, but then you can also activate the Fusion Destiny and add the DPE to that, making your boards even a little bit more durable and harder to break. You also have a ton of Bestial Bait that you can have your opponent hit before your Destroyer Phoenix gets on board, and I thought that was really nice too. Another cool thing is the space for going second cards, but I think that you do have to invest 3 slots into the Crossout and the Called By. Having your Vion or your Unizombie get hit by a hand trap is pretty terrible. There are extenders that you can play through it as far as Instant Fusion. You also have the ability to special summon out your Keldo Mudora if that happens, but then of course you also have the Horus cards, but it really depends on what the rest of your hand is, especially since there will be hands that are very susceptible to bricking when you're playing stuff like these 4 cards, the 2 copies of Malicious Denier, Happy. Then you also have the 2 copies of Mizuki, which can be pretty terrible. Same thing with Necroworld Banshee. Ishizu cards are on and off in regards to whether you want to draw them or not. Then, of course, there's the going second cards, which you can just brick on by themselves. So, a lot of caution when playing this deck. That said, I do think it's really fun, and it can do a lot of things that can just wipe out some random matchups, like the Necroworld Banshee being able to make everything zombie via Zombie World, hitting decks like Fluent, Dragon Link, and I may be missing something else, but it's not popping off the top of my head right now. That said, if there is another thing that I think makes this deck go, is the fact that not only do you have the Horus cards to get you into that zombie vampire, but you also have normal summons that can actually get you into plays. The Unizombie having the ability to discard cards as well as send them from the deck to the graveyard, even if you only have 3 targets, is something that can help you make your board bigger, because if you do happen to go into the zombie vampire, that's a zombie that you can just send the Mizuki for, and then get back zombie vampire so that you can link it off with the Unizombie if you really don't have anything else to do with it left, and at worst, that's an SP Little Knight. So, just some cool things that you can do with this deck that made me really want to experiment with it. Now, other approaches that you could take are obviously playing more Tearlaments, mill stuff, and I just didn't want to do that because at that point, you can just play Tearlaments instead. And same thing with the hero stuff. If you wanted to play more hero cards, I would suggest probably playing just heroes, because at that point you're going well over 60 or well over 40, and then at that point you're just charting in 60 territory range, where I don't think it's worth it because you want to see the Horus cards, and until we have the field spell which searches out your Horus cards, then I don't think it's worth it. So with all of that out of the way, I'll take you onto the card by card, and we have the 3 Seti, the 3 King Sarcophagus, the 3 Fusion Destiny, the 1 Zombie World, the 1 Poly, the 1 Instant Fusion, Kelbeck, Keldo, Mudora, Agido, 2 Mizukis, Necroworld Banshee, the Unizombie, Rhoda, the Shadow Mist, 2 copies of Vion. We then have the 2 copies of Mali. We then have the Denier, Happy, the 3 copies of Droll, 3 copies of Super Poly, Called By and 2 Crossouts, 3 copies of Imperm. We then have the Guardian Chimera because Super Poly or Poly is searchable via the Vion. We then have the Drago Necro since we do play Zombie World, Enforcer and the Dangerous for the Destiny package. We then have the Garura along with the Mud Dragon for our Super Poly. The Garura can also be made via the Poly if you want to go into it that way. We then have the Omega along with the Baron for our Unizombie plays. Our rank 4 Floodgates, which is really important in this deck, and I cannot stress that enough. Number 41 and the Dweller. We then have our Beatrice, our Zombie Vampire, the Hope, so that we have a follow-up rank 8. You can also use the Photon Lord. We then have Typhon, along with the SP Little Knight, to round out the deck profile. So for everyone who's made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you for watching and for the 600 plus subs. I truly appreciate your support. Now that we've monetized the channel, giving us access to supers and memberships means that more awesome stuff is on the horizon. To get the channel membership, just click on the description below, and there will be a link that takes you there. You'll also notice a free Discord link that I've made for us too. If you want to support me as a content creator, even if you can't donate supers or get a membership for the channel, clicking on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons help a lot too. For those wondering, I do plan on making updates to the channel as the support on the channel grows. Anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. It's Bones, signing out.